Boa tarde, boa noite para todas e todos que estão nos acompanhando.
Morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone, all participants here with us today. Let me tell you that this event is being translated in 3 languages. So if you would like to hear our presentations in Spanish, just search for the proper translation channel.
To the presentation in English, please certify that you are using the right link. Bom, eu sou Alexandre Barbosa, gerente do Centro Regional de...
Hello everyone, I am Alexandre Barbosa. I am in charge of Cetic.br, which is a department that is part of NIC.br, which is the Center for Information. Initially, I'd like to welcome our round table, Artificial Intelligence and Culture, and Outlook for Digital Era. That is this roundtable is part of the MONDIACULT 2022, the global UNESCO conference addressing cultural policies for sustainable development. This is a global cultural event carried out by UNESCO. This event is being broadcasted and recorded and available at our own broadcast channel. And our roundtable, as I have just mentioned, that has also been broadcasted in Portuguese, English, and Spanish. It's just a matter of being the right channel. Today, we say that artificial intelligence is present at almost everyone's players in the globe, from recommendation and content systems based on algorithms, as of the design, arts, cultural, museum visits, which are mediated by culture endeavor, a number of applications in music, visual arts, communication, design, plastic arts. There are different use and purpose that in a higher or lower degree, they can benefit and leverage cultural diversity. And it's with great honor that we'd like to share with all of you the release of Artificial Intelligence and Culture, Outlook for a Cultural Diversity in the Digital Era. This publication is available both English and Portuguese, and there are several chapters that have been written by some of our participants here today, our keynote speakers. This is a novelty carried out by Cetic, and we had added relevant information regarding artificial intelligence and culture in Brazil. Therefore, let me introduce our agenda, which will start with a very brief presentation, as this is a very large survey. And Luciana Lima, she's a Cetic.br researcher, and she also coordinated the search for data collection. So Luciana Lima, you have the floor. Thank you.
Olá, todas e todos que estão nos acompanhando.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for being with us here this morning. This is a session that is part of the MONDIACULT 2022. It's a great honor to have the chance to share this endeavor that we have been working hard for the past 1 year. So it's very pleasant to have that available for public access. So let me briefly introduce our publication and our framework. We have several texts written by our dear guests, and let me thank you for your contribution and presence here today and your contribution throughout the project. I will go into some details regarding qualitative research regarding AI and culture in a Brazilian setting. How about the methodology? We had chosen a qualitative approach which aimed to better understand AI and culture in Brazil, and to understand what would be their implications to protect and promote diversity throughout cultural expressions. We had interviewed three different groups of people: cultural agents, and by that we mean artists, cultural promoters, cultural institutions such as museums, cultural centers, digital platforms that they share online cultural content, content generated by users or on demand. We try to have a very broad scope, as this is an emergent and new topic. This is part not just of our domestic debate, but also international, in the international sphere. We were very strict from a methodological perspective, thanks to a literature review where we tried to identify and map themes that were being discussed in that scope. And we had mapped all those aspects. We had a draft of a guide to follow, to undergo all the interviews. And with all of that, we were able to codify that material based on that initial categories, allowing the development of new categories and new topics that were present as part of the Brazilian setting. Our assessment started from the cultural value chain, split into domains. We have operational use and the distribution, access and participation that will include the transmission and reception of goods. And as to production, so we have AI and creation and cultural production. Those cultural agents, they make use of those creative tools. And thanks to their involvement, we identify two other categories: operating use, that is the use of those tools to create and design new content such as video, images, sound, master, and after that, aesthetic use, where a different language is applied to design a new piece of arts. On the right, we have green and pink boxes, which identify some opportunities and challenges. First, processes optimization, thanks to the adoption of tools, automation of repeated tasks, which will allow several processes to take place fast with a lower cost, leading to a democratization of the production throughout those available apps which are available in the market, designed by producers, and to develop content in those environments which are less professional, such as in music field. You can do that at home and not necessarily you have to go to a special material, tools, or maybe a soundproof studio. And part of that material reflects digital inequalities, which affects somehow cultural environment, and that is quite restricted to some cultural agents, as we lack of access to some technologies and some apps which will require a high computer science volume use, and also the digital approach, which is based on inequality. And one last green box regarding experiment and innovating. We have a potential to experiment, to innovate, to standardize our work thanks to the use of those tools. If I expand my standard ability, I'm able to expand human ability and new standards. On the other hand, that may lead to similar content. Once AI is a reading technology, a technology with replicates and reads standards. And we had carried out a number of interviews that I will use as an example to you, such as a music platform. If you want to sound like Anita or Shakira, you may make a comparison throughout those systems and you may look like Anita or Shakira. You'll be able to replicate successful factors. As to distribution, access, and participation, we also divided that within AI and digital platforms, as we have different AI applications. For the institutions, we have mapped cultural mediation and to map our public thanks to virtual assistants during guided museum visits and to other areas. So we'll be able to better understand our audience during visits and during the digital use of technologies. The main opportunity that we have mapped has to do with interactivity and customized experience. Once I am interacting to systems, asking about the different piece of works, I will have a participation which is mediated and can guide and help each one of the visitors to meet their goals. From institutional perspective, we will include planning of cultural actions, a cultural center manager that says he can be more assertive once they are able to deal with the public interests. And conversely, we also have to cope with institutional barriers. We are facing a time of lots of gaps, lacking of technical support. We have urgent demands from a framework perspective. We have to better promote actions, and yet there are several barriers and projects, institutional projects. They are, most of them, carried out thanks to partnership with the large tech companies, which will allow to turn projects feasible. But yet they depend on external technological solutions. And once the company no longer is investing resources or following with their process, they no longer exist because not everyone is able to carry on with the initiatives. And that is a fact with institutional barriers, technological dependence to cultural institutions. But on the other hand, we see some opportunities where we may qualify and automate documentations. We may speed up metadata qualification, and that will improve access and integrated search. Institutions, they unfortunately, institutions, they still see that quite far away. That is a part of our scope, but we haven't reached that yet. And all the systems, they will allow that integrated search, as I said. And here there is an interesting testimonial of a cultural center who says, we use AI systems to search for videos. If an artist dies, for instance, we can search for specific content about that person who died to make that available to our audience. Digital platforms To cultural agents, the AI tools use is quite yet restricted, but as to platforms, we see a much broader use of the system, especially by commercial platforms with algorithmic recommendation systems, thanks to users' data collection and the implementation of collected data, we are able to recommend new content. But conversely, we map different contents within that scenario of digital platforms. We are dealing with the larger commercial platforms and some alternative ones, which are public or independent, with a smaller use of AI system, probably because that had privileged human curators to select this or that specific content. And to close and conclude, from algorithmic recommendation system, we had mapped experience, we customized the people's experiences, users' experiences. How can we suggest something new based on their consumption habits? But that also represents a risk where local contents may be underrepresented and independent production, which emphasizes a similar content display or dissemination. And that is a curious comment. A musical producer said, if I want to listen to a specific traditional music from a certain location in the country, I will not access that before the digital, and I will not access that music if no other person recommends a specific platform. And producers, they try to adapt their productions. Whatever is being in the hotspot in the platforms, they try to do something to find a format that will work to people, trying to replicate somehow those models that are effective and work. And as for alternative platforms, we have a specific look to guarantee access to content that will represent cultural diversity. We try to include different players, men, women, indigenous people, content which is not available to other platforms, to a specific group of people. And they also face institutional barriers to develop their own AI systems to be able to advance and develop into the digital platform and AI agenda. Well, there is much more to be said. The publication is so interesting, so please don't refrain from downloading it, read it, and I hope that my brief introduction has collaborated to promote our roundtable. Thank you. Thank you, Luciana. Thank you for sharing the results of this study and for being so brief and to stick to your time. You have raised here critical aspects which are key to researchers, policymakers, developers, and this is a topic to be reflected upon, and I hope that everything you have addressed here become relevant to our roundtable debate. Thank you.
Our panel will be moderated by Guilherme Varella from Instituto Cultura e Democracia. We are going to have 2 rounds of questions with our participants. And questions from the audience are most welcome. They can be submitted in any of our 3 languages through the chat of NIC.br in YouTube. Let me now invite Guilherme Varella, who will be the moderator of our panel. He has his PhD in law, University of São Paulo. He is a researcher and cultural manager, and he's also director of Instituto Cultura e Democracia in the integrated movement for freedom of artistic expression, mobility. So, Guilherme, thank you very much for being here with us today. And for having participated in this project with so much interest and enthusiasm. So you have the floor. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. It is an honor and a pleasure to be here with all of you, mediating this important discussion for access to cultural goods in digital really era, for also digital diversity as part of MONDIACULT. Launching this publication during this event is something very important. And having that as part of international agenda is something extremely important. We need to have a connection of classical topics of cultural policies with those digital topics as well. Let me start by thanking you for the opportunity. Let me emphasize how much I like Cetic, really an agency which has been dedicated with so much care and attention. So kudos to Alexandre and to the special work of Luciana Lima, Tatiana Geriasati, and Javiera Mataya, who have developed this journey. And you are going to see in the publication that this is a very important contribution to this constant discussion. Thank you, Malay Busebon, who was also part of our journey. I am director of Instituto Cultura and Democracia, and I have not only collaborated, but also learned a lot from this process. So I'm really thankful for the opportunity. Let me thank João Brunt, who has also been with us since the very beginning. As Alexandre pointed out, we are going to have 2 rounds of discussions. One for all panel members. Second one, we are going to go into group discussions. But let me introduce to you all our panelists who are going to discuss artificial intelligence and culture. Marielza Oliveira, good morning. She is Director of Partnership and Partnerships of the UN for Education and Culture, UNESCO. She was the director of the representative of UNESCO in Beijing, and she worked with PNUD. She has her PhD in administration and master in finance through Illinois University in the US. And she wrote the first article which served as an introduction to our publication. Let me introduce to you our friend from Argentina, researcher Octavio Kulesz. Welcome. Octavio is a digital editor and director of Teseo, one of the main electronic publishers in Latin America. As a specialist at UNESCO, he focused on cultural industry in digital area. In 2020, he was appointed as an ad hoc member of the specialists of UNESCO to talk about ethics and artificial intelligence, the first global document about ethics in artificial intelligence. He wrote a specific paper for that publication. Now, Lucia Santaella, she is a professor and a researcher of our CNPq, it's Technology and Scientific Development Council. She is a teacher at PUC São Paulo, published over 51 books and papers. She was awarded a number of awards in Brazil, including Jabuti, Sergio Mota, and Luiz Beltran. Thank you very much for being here with us. And finally, Daniela Ribas. Artificial Intelligence and Culture. That's the paper she wrote. And we have Daniela Ribas, who was a historian from the São Paulo Paulista University, master and PhD in sociology. She is a researcher of Sesc São Paulo and director of Sonar Cultural Consultoria, one of the main specialists of music in digital area, and she's also a board member of our institute, Democracia. She wrote the conclusion of this paper about AI and culture. Thank you very much. So, welcome everyone. I'm going to ask questions first to Marielza and then to all other panelist members. So Marielza, what are the main trends in the use of AI in the cultural area, considering this international area? Easy, isn't it? Just for you to start the discussion. Thank you very much and welcome.
Thank you very much, and hello, hola, hello, from Paris to everyone. And thank you for your excellent question, Guilherme. But before I answer, just let me congratulate Cetic and its fabulous research team on this very exciting publication, which comes in to fill an important gap in our understanding of the impacts of artificial intelligence on culture, which are very needed. And really, artificial intelligence and culture are becoming increasingly linked everywhere and at all stages of cultural production, distribution, and consumption. The critical element from my perspective has to do with how artificial intelligence is disrupting all stages of the culture and creative industry's value chain. AI has been transforming the social relations that create and support artistic and creative processes, starting with the way cultural expressions are captured and encoded as input for artificial intelligence, all the way to how artificial intelligence is used to produce and to disseminate new expressions. And from where I stand, we see several important trends that emerge. And let me mention just 5, because we only have 5 minutes. So first, innovative culture and creative goods and services are being produced. For example, we see immersive performances, the kinds that allow the audience to influence what happens next, purely digital art, interactive games, and a whole lot of other things. And even new professions that are appearing, such as emotion and mood curator in social media. A second trend is that there are significant changes in the labor market for culture and creative goods and services. AI is allowing for reducing the time human creators spend on mundane tasks, such as image labeling, or for them to assume functions that they previously needed expert collaborators to perform, such like tasks performed by sound engineers in music production, book design in literature, and so on. And while that enables new creators to enter the market, the downside is less jobs available for those skilled technicians. In addition, we also see artificial creators emerging like robot painters and sculptors, AI poets, and our musicians, and so on. A third change, a trend that I see, is change happening in the distribution and consumption of cultural goods and services, with AI contributing to the emergence of new dissemination and sales channels and the provision of personalized content. We see a huge increase in digitalization of the collections and offerings of traditional culture intermediaries, such as galleries and museums, archives, and so on, which now offer virtual tours, cultural e-commerce, online cultural learning opportunities, and so on. But we also see that the entrance of non-traditional intermediaries, the big tech platforms such as recommender systems and social media, which have tremendous market power. And these powerful intermediaries not only set the prices and service fees that are applied to creative products, but they also sometimes reduce the remuneration for creators and traditional distribution channels. And they sometimes also demand exclusivity over content, limit the supply of complementary products and access to the market for small creators, and prevent sponsorship and absorb advertising revenues. And many times keep customers in walled gardens that have an impact on their right to discover and enjoy cultural goods and services. And sometimes that even threatens the preservation and promotion of cultural diversity. A fourth trend regards the broadening of access to cultural content. AI allows for new audiences to discover and enjoy culture. For example, when these technologies are used to generate subtitles in sign language for persons with disabilities, for the elderly, or to automate text and speech translation that permits products to reach international audiences. And this global outreach of culture is also accelerating acculturation processes and a bit of harmonization, like what was mentioned at the opening. And a final trend worth mentioning is the large number of countries that are considering or already promoting regulatory reforms to catalyze innovation in cultural sectors. Many are investing also in building institutional and human capacities for the development and governance of these technologies and to facilitate the use of AI in their cultural and creative industries. I have no doubt that all these changes will have profound impacts on the diversity of cultural expressions online and digital culture. My colleagues at UNESCO from all sectors, culture, education, social and human sciences, and my own team in communications and information pay enormous attention to these technologies and are working to ensure that AI-driven changes promote the enjoyment of human rights and freedoms in regards to freedom of expression, access to information, to privacy, freedom of association, cultural rights, and artistic freedom. But, change is coming, and it's actually, we need to pay a lot of attention to how it's happening. Thanks.
Muito obrigado, Marielza.
Thank you very much, Marielza. Thank you for sticking to your time. You've really summarized beautifully everything we wanted to hear. Thank you very much. Let me now hand it over to Octavio Kulesz. Welcome, Octavio. I have a question to you as well, just as a teaser. What are the implications of the adoption of AI tools in culture to protect and promote cultural expression diversity? Welcome. Thank you very much. Thank you, Guilherme. Thank you, Alexandre, Luciana, everyone. It's an honor to be here in this panel, and it's an honor to have participated as an author of the sector study. This panel and the study are vital because artificial intelligence is the most important technology that we see acting in the world of culture. How can we analyze and try to understand what Guilherme has asked about the impact of AI technology in different cultural expression diversity? AI is very useful as any other technology because there are always opportunities and challenges at the same time whenever we incorporate new technology tools. In terms of diversity and trying to understand the challenges and opportunities, it's worth making a connection with what Marielza has said, because we have to think about the different players that are present in the cultural chain. And there are three main players involved, the three main groups of players, which is what I have also used as food for thought in the article. We have on the one side artists, performers that are the creators, then the cultural industry, and finally, the public, the audience that consume and access the products and goods generated by the other two players. And how does AI impact artists, for example? It's very clear that AI requires and it shows opportunities for artists, for creators to expand their creative power and to have unlimited creation. There are a number of powerful AI tools that are becoming simpler to be used, and we can see that they can help creators, writers, for example. They can go beyond that blank page barrier that many experience. And with GDT and other tools, with one single command, there can be a start, and then the writer can move on with the piece. So that would be like enhanced features. For industries, AI can improve productivity. because a small company of, let's say, special effects can work with those effects and just do things in few minutes that would have been taken weeks before to be produced. Thirdly, for the audience, how does AI impact them? And we've been seeing that, especially when we observe what's going on with imaging generation or text imaging, we can see an explosion of things that we have never seen. Every single week there are new illustrations, new material, new video, and this is the result of exactly of the use of these new tools. So, of course, this is a very brief summary of the advantages of diversity for all the different groups of players. What about challenges? I think that AI can help enhance the creative power of creators. But what happens is that traditional, so-called traditional artists such as a painter or a guitar player are not that familiarized with the tools. So those who are not very skillful with the tools, they will be challenged by the fact that someone who is not really skillful in the artistic production can produce something with the AI. So what happens is some traditional artists may get out of business because of that, because the competition will change. There is an increasing also weight of the digital giants in the cultural network and the cultural distribution of it. So that can also impact traditional industry. It will impact translators, copywriters. So all these functions will be challenged to some extent. So there is, yes, greater diversity, but at the same time, there is an explosion of fake art, as there had been of fake news. All the works of art that are being produced now, they have a kind of biased, and we have to think about the different biases, by gender bias, religious bias. So these are something that have to be in our radar so that we can keep on paying attention. And I believe that regardless of that, it's something that's here to stay. And what really matters is for cultural policies, for public cultural policies, to address them so that we can be able to manage all the different risks and challenges.
Muito obrigado, Octavio. Obrigado também pela...
Thank you, Octavio. Thank you for being brief and to enrich our table. You have pointed out really well our potentials that can be very helpful to map our attention points, which are very sensitive right now, ones that we are discussing upon implementation and culture. Now I'd like to hand over to Professor. How do the applications of AI in culture may affect those bridges that we have between global and north, between South and North global? Thank you. It's a great honor to be here today. The key to culture is continuity. So once we had some breaches in continuity, and that will not allow cultural development. I was very happy to see this endeavor and survey conducted by Cetic.br, which I mostly admire. I was giving a class in the post-graduation course, and the class is just, I mean, my students, they are just, in the next room here, and they are following this event where we are right now. So I concluded my work by March last year, and then I thought, well, that should be updated. So I'm so happy to see the continuity of my work, a work conducted by Luciana and her team from Cetic. The most important task to be conducted was screening what we already have in Brazil in terms of initiatives in the production, in the supply, production, and creative chain. What were the available initiatives? So to start, I should tell you that Luciana's work and her team, that should be used as a model to be replicated and taken to other Latin American countries. During my research, I tried to get what other Latin American countries already had in place. And now we have a model that can be implemented somewhere else. Just a piece of recommendation. So I started working with AI back in 2017. And my first article was, AI came to stay, to grow, and to multiply. Ever since, I see that things have happened. In fact, AI today is just everywhere. Everywhere we do, there is some sort of algorithm supporting it. We are living in a digital world that came to affect human beings. It came to be a disruptive, as a disruptive technology. And we find hard to believe and accept such a presence, as anything that takes place in AI is totally invisible. We just see the special effects, not the algorithms. The algorithms, they work on an invisible platform. And then later on, ethics will become an issue. Well, it's useless pretending not seeing the gap that we were left in the use of new technologies and artificial intelligence. In the global north, that is bumping, and global north, they count on global incentives to the development of the culture. That is its strength, is incremented now with this new mediation, that is the mediation of artificial intelligence. Latin America needs to wake up. I have been sharing that message. This is the only way to bridge the gaps of a cultural production between global south and global north. There is, Latin America is very creative and allows cultural diversity, and artificial intelligence cannot be seen as a foreigner, somewhat strange to mankind. During the creative process, that is an ally. They played the role of an ally. Once we ask artists, producers, and we ask them about AI and their opinion, they see artificial intelligence as a tool that may help and support us, even in our work. So in my thesis, I present a metaphor of a swing culture in the Eastern countries, in the Western countries, I'm sorry, it's been dominated by tech companies, the so-called big techs. That is a culture of distribution, reception, and not production. So in Latin America, we have to foster and leverage cultural production to guarantee diversity and to offset. We have to look for a way to offset not only in production, creative economy, but also in education. We have to find a way to balance our cultural diversity thanks to a metabolism that will bridge the cultural gap between the North and the South. I work with a group from the UK, and you wouldn't imagine how much incentive they got in pounds to develop AI in the musical field. So Latin America has to invest with political support and not just wait from governmental authorities, the academy, civil societies. They have to get together to perceive that we have gold in mind, artificial intelligence deployed to increment cultural production, because the culture cannot be minimized. They are doing whatever they can. If they are not able to make the best use of their increment in AI, they will end up dying, and culture has to follow the same pathway. And this is what I advocate for. Let's balance our swing, both the global South, the global North, and also the production that may offset the big techs that keep on producing recommendations that do not take us anywhere. That's it from my side now. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Lucia. Your comments and points, they were so timely in this idea of balance and rebalance. And we know that there is a gap in the AI development in the Brazilian reality, and what can we do to understand such a complexity. So, and thank you so much again. Next, I have a question to Daniela Ribas. Are you there? May I? What are the main cautions points to be taken into account as to diversity, culture, and what are the future perspectives? Before you answer, let me reinforce it to our audience. We have several people following us throughout our channel, so please don't refrain from addressing your questions. Just send them to us and they will be answered. Thank you, Daniela. Well, I am very glad to be here and to be able to participate into this very important initiative. I have a long-lasting Cetic partnership, and I'm very happy to be here. This is a relevant topic, And I agree when Professor Lucia says that we are lagging behind and that we still have much to think over and reflect about. So once again, thanks for the invitation, especially Alexandre. We have been we keep contact for many years, and to all the organizing committee for putting together this remote session, and to have these dear colleagues. You are all reference to me, Professor Lucia. I am here. So you are a reference in any course in this area of cultural reference. I have some jobs in the musical field, and I keep talking about streaming platforms, artificial intelligence, algorithms. I share that in the field where I'm working now. In the musical field, there is no profile of professionals that take this academic profile to the market. And here I'll try to do exactly the opposite, to share the reality of this topic so we'll be able to talk. I am a teacher, and I have also suggested that my students from my university would join us here today. Some issues that we should pay more attention, and they have to do with the text that I published. Those from the musical field, if you are following us via YouTube, so you have to take a look at that. So we have 4 main topics here to address. First, cultural consumption. The streaming platform, they do not sell music, neither films, but the recommendation itself. That is the main product of platforms. And let's not forget about that, because despite they allowed a dissemination and artists, they like to have their songs in the Spotify nowadays, let's not forget that the recommendation is the product to be sold for the good and for the bad. So the recommendations, they have to comply with the users' taste preferences, where we can make a better use of the musical consumption. But we have challenges, and one of those challenges is how can we balance commodities in the relations and to be able to strengthen different tastes, preferences that prevent us from finding out about new stuff. So let's not throw away commodities, but that commodity, considering the business model of the platforms, how do this business model reinforce prior tastes for data selling? And how can we run away from this business model that are present in some consolidated taste preferences in opposition to cultural diversity? So that would be the first aspect, how to balance cultural and algorithmic consumption nowadays. Second, Guilherme and Epideia Institute that helped with this regulatory agenda, which has to do with the regulation. As to copyrights, we know that we lack of transparency in the agreements between platforms and copywriters, licensors, and such as artists, cultural agents. And we know that we lack of transparency because the platforms, they do not deal directly with those licensors, but they talk to hubs which represent content licensors and artists. Despite we guarantee copyrights, the given value, intellectual property, all values, they just no longer exist. And now we have a very weak perception in the artistic field that has been compensated, but the values are so low. So in that offset regulatory aspects, we have to balance stakeholders, not just economic rights of the big techs should be balanced or understood. We have to include all copyrights, producers' copyrights that should be perceived, and big techs, they cannot overcome society interests of our artists, and also interests in the society to consume cultural framework, and the regulatory aspects, they have to observe such a balance. Third, we have a bias risk, privacy, a bias that we may include into the ethics of AI. Can platforms collect our subjective and private information? Once private information, I don't mean our telephone number, address, or CPF, but our subjectiveness, our cultural options, our choices, our digital traces, our subjective ultimately, which makes our personality. Do platforms, they have the rights to take that information and to use that information as a exchange currency with other mini techs? And we, raw material producers, don't even know what they are taking from us, what they are collecting from us, and what sort of profiles are they designing. How about micro-target for big tags? Algorithmic profile, once they give information which are not relevant to our personal profile. And which profile is that? Do we agree? The knowledge production by mankind, are we in favor of that? Do we agree? Well, do platforms have the rights to use that information as a currency exchange in other business? Well, after all, this is a result of a collective opinion, and it's becoming an input of this new economy that is driven by the big techs, let alone not be judged or classified by this or that. We don't even know what are those algorithms, judgment profiles that the internet makes use of. And last but not least important, which is governance. What is governance? Governance is different from government. Governance is a composition of strengths to establish a dialogue within the new digital environment. And by new, I mean new in the mankind. So we cannot take that virtual new space into a field with unilateral rules only that will favor economic power, big techs, and which fosters and protects only economic business based on the so-called attention economy, which is responsible for the micro-segmentation of public in the net. So the big techs, they cannot be the only ones to perform in the virtual environment. That requires a collective arrangement to establish that multilateral internet space, allowing. We are not here against the big tax activities, but rather that their activities will not prohibit and prevent us from considering some rights in the web. Big tax economic activities, they have to rely on a number of individual and collective interests that outside of the digital realm, we have those rights kind of consolidated, such as social, political, citizenship rights, but yet in the digital field, we still have a long way to go in that debate. That is it for now. I have raised those 4 aspects, which you also may find in the publication, and maybe in another round, we can go into more details. Thank you.
Dani, muito obrigado.
Great, Dani, thank you very much for your points. And we can see how you have really brought together all the issues that we discuss in the publication. Daniel just made reference to a publication that we have, which is about a political agenda for music and for internet production. Thank you very much, Daniel. Now let's have the second round of questions for our panelists. So first, I'm going to ask a question to Marielza and Lucia. So the same questions, and we are going to hear from both of you, and then Octavio and Daniela. So Marielza and Lucia, my question is, how can the topic about ethics of AI is related with protection and promotion of diversity of cultural expression? And what are the main recommendations related to this agenda of cultural diversity correlated with artificial intelligence? Marielza, would you like to go first?
Thank you very much for this important question, because, really ethics is central, to the conversation about cultural and creative industries and how artificial intelligence is impacting them. And it's central because we need to be especially careful in how artificial intelligence is deployed in this field, given the dual nature of cultural goods and services. They are not only economic products, but primarily they are intrinsic expressions of human identity and human dignity and potent signifiers of social cohesion. So it's really, we need to be especially careful and attentive to how artificial intelligence impacts this field. But let me first speak of the work UNESCO does on the ethics of artificial intelligence. In November 2021, the 193 UNESCO member states adopted a recommendation on the ethics of AI, which considers that AI technologies can generate tremendous benefits for humanity, but they also raise a lot of ethical concerns due to the opacity of decisions derived from them, to the biases that they can embed and exacerbate, and those can lead to discrimination and exclusion, prejudice, stereotyping, inequality, as well as to digital, social, and economic divides, and that threatens cultural and biological diversity as well. So the recommendation advanced values and principles that could permeate the development and use of AI in all fields, given the potential impact of these technologies. And it recommended that AI systems should be developed in ways that advance the respect and protection of human dignity, human agency, human rights, fundamental freedoms. But they also should promote ecosystem flourishing and ensure diversity and inclusion and lead to peaceful and justice societies. And the recommendation pays special attention to the ethical implications of AI systems on culture and encourages member states to establish a series of policies that enable cultural identity and diversity to flourish. And because this recommendation recognizes that artificial intelligence can benefit culture and creative industry actors, all the way from creators to consumers, but also that AI tech has been concentrating the supply of cultural content, data and income on the hands of a very few actors, the big techs that we all been talking about. And therefore, this restricts the diversity and the pluralism of cultural expressions and our ability to freely enjoy culture. And, as well as introducing bias and discriminatory outcomes, the recommendation encourages member states to adopt several policies specifically for the cultural sector. So the first of those is that AI systems should be used to advance the protection and promotion of all forms of cultural heritage, but taking appropriate safeguards. And this, for example, includes participation of all stakeholders in decision-making, as Dani has just mentioned. It examines and addresses the cultural impacts of natural language processing systems, the types of things that are like automated translation, voice assistances, etc., and on the nuances of human language and expression, because they alter things very subtly, and as well as on the continuous use of endangered languages. They also recommend that member states build capacities of artists and creators to consider whether to use AI, as well as to contribute to the development of these technologies in ways that promote creativity and artistic freedom rather than the economic outcomes that they are being designed to promote. They recommend awareness of AI among local culture industries and culture and tourism related small and medium-sized businesses, for example, so that they can participate on a more equal basis in digital markets and in informed ways as well. They recommend that member states work with big tech companies to promote discoverability of local content that ends up hidden, by these types of algorithms. Recommend that they pay attention to how artificial intelligence affects intellectual property rights of creators. And finally, they encourage traditional intermediaries such as museums, libraries, galleries, and all of those to use AI systems in curation, conservation, restoration, and provision of participatory access to their collections. And finally, the recommendation proposes that impact assessments should be made both ex ante and ex post to the deployment of AI systems in any field, and that extends to culture as well. So there are a lot of different things that member states should be paying attention to doing, in order to ensure that artificial intelligence is deployed in ways that, that really enable flourishing of digital, culture and the diversity of cultural expressions. So I'll stop here and yield the floor, to Lucia, please.
Bem, na primeira parte, eu falei sobre...
In my first contribution, I've talked about the solar aspect of artificial intelligence. Now I'm going to speak about the moon aspect, so sun and moon. There is a constant concern with ethics in artificial intelligence. The course that I'm teaching, whose my students are just next door to me, is semiotics of algorithms. And I said in my first contribution that artificial intelligence works invisibly. Therefore, we necessarily have to open the black box and see how things work. And let me tell you how it works. Artificial intelligence and algorithms are not separated from human beings. They are fed by human data. They are selected by human beings. The algorithm is modeled by humans. There is no separation, therefore. But Daniela has also spoken about regulation. And Marielza has addressed the recommendations and the warning systems that have to be put in place when decisions and results are made through algorithm process. If something is done through an algorithm and comes into the market, we have to be attentive. We have to have a process with criteria. And I advocate an idea followed by a number of authors, including some which are there producing the algorithms. I think we should have on-board ethics, in other words. Artificial intelligence projects have necessarily to be multidisciplinary. they have to involve people. And onboard ethics, it should consider also the training of the people who are going to produce content. When they are at university, they need to be taught about ethics, because the worst bias and prejudice are unconscious. So we have to be extra careful when artificial intelligence is being employed. Ultimately, we cannot accept artificial intelligence models which wouldn't be put through curatorship. Everything has to be considered upfront. I've been stating that we all have to develop the ethics of suspicion. In the digital world, everything seems to be suspicious. For example, the fake news, which can only be faced and discussed when we develop the ethics of suspicion, as I call it. And it should be developed not only in the systems of regulation, but also by those that develop artificial intelligence. And they have to develop at the same time listening skills. Specialists have to be heard. It is an algorithm that is going to work in biology, so biologists have to be heard. Philosophers have to be heard. It is a new way of bringing people together that have to be developed and be involved. So recommendations are important. Regulations are important. But it's important that each and every individual can be educated to the new world of artificial intelligence, which has benefits and also downsides. We don't have to be concerned about benefits because they speak for themselves. We have to be concerned about risks. And each and every one of us in the educational processes, we really have to start educating our children to be prepared for the future. Thank you very much for our two speakers. I think it's working fine. We have a full room. We have more than 90 people watching us. So thank you very much for all students who are here with us as well. And thank you, Marielza. I think the UNESCO agenda has to be disseminated. We have to give more visibility because it's something absolutely essential for our strategy. And Lucia pointed out to something important, which is digital literacy. And we can see how important it is to provide full access. Thank you very much for the two of you. But now let me give the floor to Octavio and Daniela. How can we face the challenges involving the presence of AI in culture in Brazil and in our Latin American countries? How is it possible to have cultural policies in integration, preferably, that would really include culture and AI? Maybe Octavio will go first and then Daniela. I think that in each of our countries in Latin America, we should develop our own culture of a national plan of cultural digital culture that would include artificial intelligence. In digital culture and artificial intelligence, I believe we could help different actors, or different players, I mean, involving the academia and all different players. For creators, for artists, ideally, they should have access to capacity building. So what is artificial intelligence? Maybe they should have courses about basic programming, such as Python. They can be introduced to deep learning and how to train the machine by inputting data so that we can obtain results from algorithms. We should also work with creative industries in building capacity for all different sectors, visual arts, music. And we should also start questioning about intellectual property during the era of AI. It's a very complex topic, and researchers and some lawyers working on the topic have just started asking questions. Nobody knows who is the author or who is the owner of an artificial intelligence works of art. And this recent week, we've seen a number of artists discussing that. The artists have input data into the machine, and then they saw their style being copied. So we have to discuss that. I think that the audience should also be made aware to how digital art works. I think the participants are aware of the bias of algorithm, of the big tech tendencies. There are even shows on Netflix talking about that. But the public does not hear much about how content creation is made through automated devices. So the songs we hear in Spotify, or the pictures we see at the internet, part of them are generated by artificial intelligence. And we still need to disseminate that information throughout. And by working with different levels of the chain, we can focus them individually and also through the different sectors, cross-section. We should have national plans of artificial intelligence, but in some of them, which already exist, there is no reference to culture. They talk about finance. They talk about transportation. They address defense, but they rarely talk about culture. So I think that this is the time that Ministry of Culture and all the cultural industry in our countries should really collect and focus on that. We should also invite the technology sector to interact with the world of culture. So programmers of artificial intelligence or developers should talk to artists, to cultural entrepreneurs, because it can expand their perspective. So we have to take technology to culture and culture to technology. And what Marielza has said, the recommendation about ethics and AI, which was approved in November 21 by all state members of UNESCO, gives us very important principles and values and a number of concrete actions on what to do. Culture is a strategic priority areas together with education, environment, gender. So I think that this is something over which we can produce public policies for the future. But inevitably, they have to be developed locally because each country has its own specificity. Great. Thank you, Octavio. Daniela? So interesting to hear all panelists because there are multiple viewpoints here. We come from different backgrounds, but regardless of our main agenda, it seems that all points that have been brought about share points in common. So when people from different eras with different experience bring the same topics for discussion, even though from different perspectives, it means that it's a social fact. It's something palpable to all of us. It means that all the phenomena that we can see and bring for discussion are not simply dreams of intellectuals that react against our times. Sometimes they tell me, I am against algorithms. I am not against algorithms. I just believe that we are going through a moment in which those points really attract my attention. I cannot refrain from discussing the setbacks or the moon-related points just because there are positive points and strength. So I think it's extremely rich to exchange opinions with you and see that our observations, even though slightly different, they all have a common goal. I agree with everything that has been said, and I would like to reinforce the importance of education, because technologies are being developed, implemented, and adopted without taking into consideration the uneven distribution to different regions, social groups, different contexts. A lot of technology, very little sociology. Programmers needed to be taught on sociology because they program technology and they don't know about social impact. I'm not saying that they are to be blamed, but everything is new. And there is a generation of IT technicians, data scientists, and programmers who do not know exactly what they are doing in terms of social characteristics.
I remember Franz Kaugen. Once she came to Brazil, she is a former Facebook collaborator. And she came here once and she said exactly that. She said, we programmers, as she is herself, we would need more sociology classes to better understand the social consequences of this monster that we are creating despite its benefits. So cultural creators, similarly to data scientists that should learn sociology, I also think that cultural producers and artists, they should learn a little bit more about tech aspects. Technology is a type of language, isn't it? So we have to be prepared for this language. There is a win-win situation. We can all learn if we learn more from human science and sociology, and if others, they will learn more from technology. So I am a professor. My birthday is at Teacher's Day, and I'm here addressing all these aspects that they have to do with someone who is a teacher. And we cannot think about a policy without considering comparable culture. We are in a Brazilian country, which Portuguese is the main language, and we are trying to be too immediatist, and we end up learning things just in Portuguese. We cannot try to reinvent the wheel. We have to perform compared cultural policy studies to better understand our role. Here, you do not sign a hotel admission without learning about that hotel privacy policy. So to what some countries it became a consensus, it's not quite the case in Brazil yet. So we have to find, to look for this balance, big techs and societies. And comparable policies, they may be helpful to dialogue about cultural policies, not only to the culture, but to sciences, technology, and innovations, the so-called CTI policies. Let's not forget about them, as they are not just cultural, they work also as a policy in technology. And for that, we have to perform a comparable cultural policy. And moreover, we tend to suggest new policies, but that's not all. Cultural policy requires not only showing new policies, but to be mediators. If we are not dealing with a policy that will mediate interests and several stakeholders, who will do that? So cultural policy is not just creating political or foster elements or just to regulate throughout their tools, but to participate at the dialogue as a mediator. What I can share with all of you from a market perspective is a need for a new mentality, and artists, they are key in that mentality role change. If we think about the governance of the digital system, we are in a very critical and timely moment for that. As we are going through elections in Brazil, it's high time we update our mentality, our reasoning about progress. If we keep moving, considering that just the big tax interests should be taken into account, we are going to have a much more a vision perspective than anything else. I share Martin Geraldo's visions that we have to have a vision of ecosystem and not industry. So far, the collective progress is utopic, and we cannot let that being just an utopia. We see huge opportunities for algorithmic recommendations and AI in the cultural field. My main resistance in the musical field is the following. People, they are so enchanted with the possibilities of metrics offered by social media, streaming platforms like Spotify for artists. They give the metrics for musical consumption. How about consumers' behavior as to your work? There are several metrics that indeed they can be very helpful to manage a career. But the musical market, it seems to be so fascinated and so modest regarding digital market information, preventing the market to discuss upon challenges. And that discussion should be addressed by artists and producers and agents. Otherwise, we won't get anywhere. Artists, they have to embed it and embrace that discussion. I see a great need for the Web3 adoption that is still utopic, but I think that is the best way to leverage better governance in the web. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you to all speakers, to all panelists. You know, I have been very assertive with time. We unfortunately are reaching our time, which was 1 hour and a half. But let me raise some questions that were addressed. The debate over the chat is of high quality. So I will leave 3 questions to you all, Marielza, Lucia, Octavio, and Dani. Please, your final remarks while answering those brief questions, okay? So we have a question from... So the questions are addressed to all of you, and please choose one to answer or summarize briefly all of them. Sérgio Eduardo Antonio is asking, exemplify standards that are used as an input to assess AI standards in arts. Second question. Regulatory aspects with the potential regulatory potential as take into account the European model, such as the Brussels one. Third question, what are the professions that are aligned to AI? And Elaine has a final provoking question. At what extent does AI mask socioeconomic power and it turns into a salvation arm to some? Should we disguise it or not? So let's follow the order. Mariel, Octavio, Lucia, and Dani. In Brazil, we had a candidate that he would answer to all questions very, very fast. So why don't you do the same? Thank you. First, I would like to thank. I've learned more than I have shared here today. And all questions addressed by the public, they were really timely, and it's important that our participants, they had awakened to that question at what sort of look should we give to AI in culture. I like the expression used by Lucia, the moon and the sun side. I believe the sun side of AI, there is much, really much more to add, to collaborate to the society as a whole. But we do need to give a clear attention to risks. Technologies, they face risks. And by those risks, I mean inequality. And the inequality, gender, economic inequality, urban and rural areas inequalities. This is where exactly we have to pay more attention. And if we are writing new policies, new regulations for AI, how can we reach inclusion, to involve everyone, and to have equity, multi-sectorial participation? That is key. As well as everyone who is part of the technology should also participate. But above all, that ability has to reach marginal culture producers, such as a culture from remote areas. If we don't have those producers able and skilled, we will be following inequality standards, internally or externally, being global south, global north. That's it from my side. Ethics, we have to consider that everyone has to develop that together, and only then things will work out fine. Thank you so much. It was great. Lovely publication. Thank you. Thank you, Marielza. Thank you for being here with us. Octavio, your turn. I wish I could answer the question about new careers. The so-called traditional jobs will be kept, those that work just with technology or just with culture. a traditional artist that makes use of tools to feed an engine, but that artist is running risks, is going through risks. And that takes place not only with artists, but also with programmers, because the tools that highlight the texts, they also help us to highlight content. They start writing a program from a draft. Unfortunately, his internet connection is quite weak. We are not able to listen and translate the whole message that he's trying to convey. Hybrid professions. Those artists that they work with technologies and they mix up. Like someone that would write down the commands for AI. New artists, they say in the device, please design a football ball with clouds. And then the device, the machine tries to convey that information. But there are some websites that give recommendations for that purpose. I think those companies that make the best use of the hybrid use of technologies, they will be more successful. Thank you, Octavio. Thank you for your time and participation, Professor Lucia. I agree with Marielza. Was a great learning, an amazing session, so rich session. People that are here together with similar concerns. And, as a result, we were able to reach some convergence. But let me go back to some important elements here. I wish that Luciana's project will be disseminated all over Latin America. It's key that each country is aware of what they are already producing and what else to be in haste. Latin America has to wake up. Octavio is right. When I started my survey, my research, culture is the main forgotten element of this equation. Culture matters. Culture is the source that will reach all other fields. I cannot forget Walter Benjamin saying, the revenge will come by the superstructure. And I agree with Marielza. We have to see AI as a friend, as an ally. The large AI hubs in the globe, they have a department, or they are called AI human-centered AI. Well, I see technology and humans as being not separate. That started with the photography camera that allowed us to see things that we couldn't see in nude eyes. Artificial intelligence is not split from humans. Humans today, human intelligence. I am finalizing a book this week, as a matter of fact. So AI, now I perceive that AI came to teach us to know more about humans, human beings. This is what matters, and not technology. What technology does with human beings that is different from what we human beings do with technology. This should be our main concern. And humans, they have to behave ethically. Therefore, in AI, that is visible. It becomes greater ethical problems. That's why I have this idea in mind to have an ethics that suspects from others, which is important in this contemporary setting where we live.
Daniela, well, I'm sorry, there is one window just next to me, and it's getting a bit too light. I have nothing to add, especially because there is very little time, but I would like to make a comment about cultural policies. Would the European model be applicable to us? I would say no, but we have to study. Studying is different from adopting things immediately, and we've done that before. When Gilberto Gil was Ministry of Culture and defined cultural policy in 3 dimensions, it was not invented by him. It was adapted from a recommendation by UNESCO of the 3 dimensions of culture for the Brazilian context. And this is what made our culture really evolve. So I think that when we think about compared cultural policies, we shouldn't adopt models from abroad, but study options, study the responses to different challenges that we all face, and then select the best practice. This is what compared public policy is. To close, I would like to quote a sentence that I seen in a graffiti. I am in Catalonia, and there is a constant strive for independence. And I saw the following sentence in a graffiti showing one political prisoner, and it said, either we play all together or we simply torn the cards. So in artificial intelligence, it applies. Either we play it all or we are going to simply tear apart the cards. So let's play it all together. And we have to concentrate our efforts. And this is what this very special panel was created. It's very important to have that kind of discussion, that exchange of experience, which is not something a research or academic research. No, we have to bring our students to get on board. This is what I believe. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Daniela. Thanks everyone for contributions of our 4 panelists. And Alexandre, Luciana, thank you very much for the invitation to be the moderator. Let me now hand it back to you, Alexandre, so that you can close. Thank you. Thank you, Guilherme, for this wonderful moderation and for such a rich discussion about artificial intelligence and culture. This panel was really outstanding. Thank you all very, very much. And to close, as we are running late, on behalf of Cetic.br and not NIC.br, thank all of you, panel members, for your time, for your generosity and sharing, and for your enthusiasm in addressing this topic. You have contributed to our publication, and it is really a very comprehensive publication. But thank you all for joining us today. Hope we can maintain an open dialogue about such an important topic for our society, for public policies. And in addition to thank our panel members and Guilherme, I would like to thank the translation teams. Thank you very much. And for NIC.br team, the dedication of Luciana Lima, Javiera Macai, Tatiana Gerasati. So my special thanks to all participants who have been with us on those 4 YouTube channels. We had over 150 people listening to us here who have participated actively in the chat. Unfortunately, we didn't have time to address all questions, but I would like to remind you that the publication is already available for download in our website in Portuguese and in English. We will soon have a printout also in Portuguese. Thank you so much. I wish you a great week and a great event during MONDIACULT 2022, which is being held in Mexico City. Thank you all very much. Have a great day.